Welcome to Excel Basics video number 1. In this video, we get to learn about formulas, functions, formatting, cell references, and page setup. And that's just video number 1 in this new Excel Basics 10 video class. I'm going to cover all the topics to make you awesome in Excel. Now in video number 1, we're going to build this amazing gradebook. And it's going to be totally dynamic. So if I change extra points from 10 to 15, before I hit Enter, watch what happens here. Enter. Everything updates. Here's the topics. I'm actually going to start off with, hey, what is Excel? We'll talk about the amazing fill handle and angry rabbit, default alignment, entering data, old school formulas, and the amazing Microsoft 365 make our life easy dynamic spilled array formulas. We'll talk about these functions, including the amazing new XLOOKUP function. We'll talk about the ever important number formatting, Excel's golden rule, and even page setup. Now, for those of you who want to download the Excel workbook and follow along with everything in this video, either below the YouTube video or at my People website, you find the link and right-click Save Link As. That opens the Save As dialog box. I'm going to select a particular location. And because there's lots of cool files in this free class, when I select Desktop, I'm going to click the New Folder button or use the keyboard Control-Shift-N. I'm going to name it something like my Excel Basics class and Enter. And then Enter. I see the folder path here. Here's the name of the file that I'm going to save into this folder when I click Save. On the taskbar, you can click this icon for the File Explorer, or it used to be called Windows Explorer. Go to the desktop. Find your particular folder you created. Select it on the left. Then on the right, I'm eventually going to have lots of files here. But to open this, I'm not going to open Excel and then Control-O to open. I'm just going to double-click it in Windows Explorer. And now our file is open. I can see up in the title bar the name of the file. Now, I have some notes here. This is the sheet where I'm going to talk about what is Excel. But if you Control-P, I've done page setup. So here's a complete cheat sheet with all sorts of notes. Over here on Notes, Control-P. These are all the awesome notes about formatting, formulas, functions, and page setup. Now, before we go over to the Gradebook sheet and build everything from scratch, I want to start off by going to WIE. What is Excel? Now, we have an Excel file called a Workbook file here. And actually, let's jump down to 9, ribbon, and 10, quat. Up here, Home tab, Insert tab, Page Layout, Formulas. All of these tabs together are called the ribbon, and they just contain commands where we use a drop-down arrow to get to a particular command or a button. Up here, this is called the Quick Access Toolbar. It has a couple items. In a later video, I will show you how to completely customize this so all of your favorite items are right in the Quick Access Toolbar. Now, if we look down to number 8, what does Excel actually do? Well, it can do anything, period. But broadly speaking, it does two things. It can make calculations, like we have some sales numbers, and we create a formula, in this case using the sum function, to add. That's an example of a calculation. If I scroll over just a little bit, data analysis is the second thing that Excel does. And all that means is go from raw data into some useful information. In this case, we wanted to see which product had the largest sales. So we created this report using the pivot table feature. And then clearly we can see Carlota had the largest sales. So making calculations and data analysis, going from raw data into useful information to make a decision. That is what Excel does. Now, the structure of Excel. Well, at its essence, it's a two-way grid. Hey, this is called a column, and columns are designated by letters. D, C, B. Rows are designated by numbers. So the intersection of a column and a row, notice only two directions, but the intersection, that's called a cell. And the name of the cell, D8. If you look up into the formula bar, hey, hover your cursor right there. That's called the name box. So we can look up there and see it says, hey, that's D8. Right here, that's C4. So we have columns, rows. The intersection is a cell. All the cells together is called a worksheet, or sheet for short. Down here, the name of this sheet, this is called the Worksheet tab, WIE. If I take that's a selection cursor, but if I point right over the Sheet tab notes, I see that arrow, I can click and move to a different sheet. Now, each Sheet tab has the name of the worksheet. If we go back to WIE, we have columns, rows, cells. All the cells together make up the worksheet. The name of the worksheet is down in the Sheet tab. Now, we've been using our cursor to select a sheet, but there's a great keyboard. Control page down, moves to the right, activating the next sheet. Control page up, moves to the left. Perhaps the best way to navigate to sheets is these are called scroll arrows. If you right-click, it opens up the Activate dialog box. You can select whichever sheet you want, click OK, and it jumps right to that sheet. Right-click, Activate. I want WIE, click OK. Now, columns, rows, cells, all the cells make up the worksheet. The worksheet name is in the Sheet tab. And all the sheets together make up the Excel workbook. The Excel workbook file name is right up in the title bar. There's the Quick Access Toolbar. That's the name of this file. So don't mix up the name Workbook. That's all the worksheets. And Worksheet, that's just a particular worksheet with all the cells. All right, let's scroll down. We have two other really important Excel topics. Hey, default alignment. When you enter text, numbers, logical, or you accidentally get an error, there's a default alignment that tells you what type of data it is. When you enter text, it's always aligned to the left. Numbers, which can be numbers, times, and dates, align to the right. If you enter a logical true or false, it's automatically centered and capitalized. And if you accidentally create an error, which we'll see later when we create formulas, it's centered. Now, let's come off to the side here and practice entering some data and see if default alignment can help us. I'm going to type Word and Enter. The default alignment is to the left, so we know that Excel thinks that's text. If I type 43, Enter, there's the default alignment to the right, so we know Excel thinks that that is a number. If I select the cell and type 43.12, uh-oh, I made a typing error. When I enter that default alignment to the left, that means Excel thinks this is text, not a number. That's our visual cue that we had a typing error. I'm going to double-click backspace, and now I have only a single decimal, so when I hit Enter, Excel thinks it's a number. Same holds for time and dates. If I type 8 a.m., I was supposed to type a space between the number and the a.m., but when I hit Enter, there's my visual cue that I mistyped. Double-click, type a space, hit Tab, and now we have the default alignment to the right. We know Excel thinks it's a proper time value. Let's enter 12/32/2024. Well, Excel knows there's not 32 days in December. Double-click, backspace, get rid of the 2, type a 1, and Enter. The default alignment lets us know we didn't make a typing error this time. That's a proper date value. The other way, besides tracking down data entry errors, the default alignment is really helpful. It's a lot of the data in the world is stored in databases. And when we export it from a database, it often comes in as text. So if you get a column of values like this, you don't even have to build a formula. You know that formula is not going to work because the visual cue tells you that's text. If I do come over, and let's say we want to add, so we use the sum function. This actually will be our first formula we ever create. Home, editing, and the sigma button, if you click it, it'll put in the sum function. But although there are 450 amazing built-in functions like sum and average, PMT, only one of them is cool enough to have a keyboard. And there it is, Alt equals. All right, with the cell selected, let's use our keyboard, Alt equals. Now it's polite. It puts the equal sign as the first character in the cell. All formulas start with an equal sign. And here's the amazing built-in sum function. This number one argument just requires that we highlight. And I'm going to use my selection cursor, highlight some cells. Notice the dancing ants. If you accidentally highlight the wrong cells, no problem. Highlight the correct cells, the correct 3 cells, and hit Enter. Nope, it's not going to work. The sum function, F2, is programmed to ignore text. Now, later in the class, we'll learn the amazing Power Query tool built into Excel. That allows us to import data from anywhere and assign the correct data type so we never have to deal with this problem again. All right, another important topic besides default alignment is number formatting. Home, number group, there's a drop-down. We can apply number formatting to numbers. Now, let's just see one of the world's most famous Excel problems. Hey, 3 plus 4 plus 5. If I click in the cell and hit F2, well, the sum function looks like it's working. I can do that one in my head. It should equal 12. But what is going on here? F2 to put it in edit mode? How can you add 3, 4, and 5 and get 13? The reason is number formatting. Someone came and reduced the decimals. If I click in the top cell and select all 4 cells, come up to number, and I'm just going to increase the decimal. What? Number formatting was hiding those decimals. Let's reduce and then select the cell. On the surface of the spreadsheet, we see 3. That's number formatting applied on the top of the cell. Up in the formula bar, number formatting does not change the underlying number. That number there that the sum function is using to get a total is 3.4. 4.4, 5.4. Now, when I have a situation like this, I usually highlight all the cells. And we're going to use our eraser that wipes away all number formatting. Home, number, drop down. And the one right at the top, general. This is like an eraser. No matter which one of these number formatting options you applied, when I use the eraser, general, bam, it wipes it all away. And now we can see the culprit. Number formatting was just making it look a certain way without changing the underlying numbers. Now, we will definitely learn how to officially change the underlying number with the round function, but you can't do it with number formatting. Now, we want to look at another common mistake that people make with number formatting that affects the formula. Now, here's a tax rate, 0.0375. That means for every dollar, you have to pay 3.75 pennies. If we formatted this as a percent, it would be 3.75%. Now, the person in charge of this says, no, the tax rate is actually 4%, 0.04. So they come up and they decrease the decimals. And bam, on the surface, it looks like 0.04. So the person comes over and creates a formula thinking they have 0.04. Now, this is our second formula. And all formulas start with an equal sign as the first character in the cell. And instead of highlighting a range of cells, I'm just going to click the cell P35 with that 100. I need to multiply, so I need an asterisk, Shift 8, or asterisk on the number pad. And then I select 0.04. Well, I can do that in my head. That should be $4. When I hit Enter, the person says, uh-oh, the formula is making an error. The formula is not making an error. F2, formulas, never see number formatting. If I escape, click in this cell, I can look up in the formula bar. The number does not change when you apply number formatting. It just displays the number in a certain way. So a lot of people get in trouble with this. This number formatting does not change the number, and formulas never see the number formatting. If you actually want 0.04, you have to select the cell and type 0.04. The number on the surface matches the number underneath, and I get exactly what I want, $4. Now, if we want to change it back to 0.375, I select the cell, 0.0375. Now, before I hit Enter, I see the number there, but when I hit Enter, it's 0.04. That's because when I click back on this cell, I still have a number formatting applied. If I look up here, that's the underlying number. Now, I'm going to use our eraser, drop down General. You want to make sure, and however you format it, it matches the underlying number if you're going to use it somewhere else in a formula. Now, the same thing holds true if we apply percentage number formatting, because 0.0375 again means 3.75 pennies for every dollar. But we can add a formatting. It won't change the underlying number because that underlying number is necessary to make calculations. But we don't have to multiply by 100, add a percent symbol. We can just simply select the cell. I'm going to use the drop down. Percentage, I can see right there the preview. This will give me percent with 2 decimals showing. And sure enough, that's just a way to format the number 0.0375. We still get exactly the same thing. If I decrease the decimals, oh, that's 4%. We don't leave it like that because it misleads whoever is looking at this. Increase the decimals. Another thing about percentage number formatting. If I click in this cell and decrease the decimal, the surface shows me 3. I can look up in the formula bar. But actual numbers like this, changing the decimals is one of the only times you can actually look up into the formula bar and see what's actually there. Control Z. Watch this. I'm going to select 3.75. Oh, it's not showing me the 0.0375. It's showing me the actual percentage. The only way, if you get a spreadsheet like this, to check is if you come and apply your eraser general. Then you can see the actual decimal. That decimal is there. It has to be there if our formulas are going to be correct. Control Z. One other thing about percentage. If I come up and decrease the decimals, 4%, look at that. It's sort of polite. It shows me at least that 3.75 is the real percentage I'm using. Again, we don't leave it like that. Increase the decimals. So whether you apply percentage number format, make sure to show enough decimals so we can see what that number is. If we leave it as a decimal, same thing. All right, so what is Excel? Number formatting is so important. It just displays the number a certain way without changing the underlying numbers. Default alignment helps us with entering data and gives us a visual cue when we get text numbers. We talked about the ribbon, the quat, and the structure of Excel. Now we can go over to Gradebook. We want to create our Gradebook here. But let's go click on this sheet here, because this is what we're going to try and create. Now notice I have a bunch of stuff off to the side because I'm going to show you some cool tricks. But if I were to print this out, I don't want that stuff. So I'll also show you how to do page setup. So when you Control P, it looks beautiful like that. Escape. Let's go over to Gradebook. All right, in our first project here, you're going to be amazed how many different cool Excel tricks we learn. In fact, a lot of the basics that you need are all in this project. So the goal is to create a gradebook with student name, test 1, test 2, test 3, 4, some quizzes, total scores, percentage grade, and decimal grade. So in cell B7, I'm going to type name. And instead of hitting Enter, which puts the thing in the cell and moves the cursor down, since the next task is to move to the right and type test 1, I'm using the Tab key. Test 1. And since the next task is to copy this cell, instead of hitting Enter or Tab, I'm using Control Enter. That puts the thing in the cell and keeps the cell selected. Now, why does it matter? Why do we have to use Tab and Ctrl Enter instead of Enter? Because it saves a lot of clicks. If you know what you're going to do next, use the right keystroke. That saves a lot of clicks. Over your whole lifetime, that's like a whole free vacation. Now, we got to talk about that little green box in the corner of the selected cell. That's a magic box called the fill handle. And we have to talk about cursors. That is the selection cursor. This is the move cursor. We do not want that one. We want to hover over that fill handle. And when we see that one right there, that's the crosshair. That's at least what Bill Gates calls it. I like to call it the angry rabbit. So I hover over the fill handle. I click with my angry rabbit and click and drag. And you got to be kidding me. It incremented tests. Anytime you have a word and a number, it will do that. For example, if we type quiz 1, Control Enter, fill handle with our angry rabbit, there are 4 quizzes. Now, in just a moment, I'll show you a bunch of other amazing things that that fill handle does. Now, let's select cell K7, total, tab, percent grade, tab, decimal grade, and enter. Now notice the text is kind of hanging over into the N column. If we point between column M and N, there's the cursor that allows us to click and drag and change the column width. Now we want to enter names. In the class, we have Sue, and the goal now is to do something in the cell below, so this is where we use enter. Gigi, enter. Chantel, enter. Dean, enter. Miki, enter. And Mo, enter. Now, just as we have a total and grade columns over here, I want a row that will calculate the average for each test and quiz. So I'm going to type the word average. And since the next step requires that this cell is selected, I'm going to use Control Enter. Now, the next thing is I want to highlight all this. And I could do it this way and then add borders. But instead, there's an awesome keyboard. Either Control asterisk on the number pad or Control Shift 8 on the regular number pad. Now, I know a lot of you will try Control 8. And this brings up the outlining grouping dialog box. You got to hit Shift to get to the little asterisk on the number 8. So Control Shift 8. Or I always use the asterisk on the number pad. Control asterisk. That is amazing. It highlighted all of the current region. Now we can add borders. Home, font. Here's the border dropdown. I'm going to select all borders. And when we add borders, fill color, font color, that's called style formatting. That's different than number formatting. Number formatting is for numbers. Now, to the headers, let's highlight and add some fill and font color. If we come to the dropdown and add red, if we printed this out, it would be hard to read. You always want to make sure that the value difference between the font and the fill color is big enough so it's easy to read. And the way you can tell is you squint your eyes. And if it's hard to see the difference, you need to increase the value difference. In this case, if I was going to use red, I would come over, use the dropdown, and use white. And then when you squint your eyes, you can see the difference. I'm going to end up using the dropdown and this dark blue right here. Now, I want to add the same font and fill to average, but here's a great trick. I'm going to select this cell. Up in Home Clipboard, that's the Format Painter. You can also get the Format Painter by right-click. And there's the mini toolbar. If I click, you can see the cursor is loaded up with the paintbrush. That means wherever I click, it's going to just apply the formatting. When I click, it applies the formatting. It didn't copy the content. Now, we're going to have a bunch of formulas here and here. And I would like to add a particular color to indicate that formulas are in these cells. Now, what I want to do is I really want to highlight just these cells and apply a particular color. Now, how did I do that? Well, I have to teach you the difference between the Shift selection trick and the Control selection trick. If I click in this cell right here, and before I click at the end, if I hold Shift, it's like highlighting everything in between the bookends. However, if I click in this cell, hold Control, and click here, it highlights only the cells we selected. Now, these two tricks work in every application: Word, PowerPoint, email. I love to check my emails like this. Click, 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 and then delete. All right, so I'm going to highlight these cells right here, and now hold the Control key and click. Now I can come up and select a color, and I've been using the same color for over 25 years to indicate that this cell has a formula. And it's that color right there. You probably don't have it, so you have to come to More Colors. And it's that green right there, almost directly in the center. That's white, and then that green. Now, the reason I chose this green many years ago, if I click OK, click off to the side, is because that was the same color as accounting paper. All right, now we have a clear visual indicator formulas, and all of the raw data will be here. Now, before we enter all of our scores, I want to come up and select B5. I want a row with the total possible points for each assignment in this row. So I'm going to type max points, tab, 100, Control Enter. And now we're going to see that the fill handle does lots of different things. If it's just a single number, when I get my Angry Rabbit and click and drag, well, it just copies. Down here, it was text and a number, so it knew to increment. In just a moment, I'll show you some other cool tricks with dates and months and things like that. Now, another way to enter data or the same piece of data into multiple cells is if I highlight these 4 cells. The light color cell is called the active cell. If I type the max score of 30 into quiz 1 area, if I use Control Enter, that says, hey, I want to put that thing from the active cell into all the highlighted cells. Now, I love this trick because in our world where there seems to be so much trouble, I think the most important thing is love. So I like to highlight a bunch of cells when things are bad. Type love, Control Enter, and it's like putting love everywhere. Now I want to undo that. Instead of up here, I'm going to use the keyboard Control Z. Up here, I'm going to say total, or hopefully I'll spell it right, and Enter. Now I'm going to use my Shift key and click. I've highlighted that, but I need that because I want to add borders. So now I'm going to hold Control. I add some borders. Right here, looks like the column isn't wide enough. So between B and C, I'm going to click and drag. Oh, hey, wait a second. Watch this. Right-click, and instead of clicking it one time, that loads the cursor paintbrush for just one click. If I double-click it, now everywhere I click until I click Escape, I can paste that formatting. Click, click, and then to turn that off, Escape. Here I want some green. And now we have our grade table. Now, before we enter our formulas and scores, I've got to show you some great fill handle and Angry Rabbit tricks. All right, B17 is selected, and I want to show you a great date and fill handle and Angry Rabbit trick. Now, many of us have to enter transactions into Excel, and we need to always type today's date. Well, luckily, there's a keyboard for today's date. Control semicolon. And sure enough, Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. Control Enter. Point to the fill handle. There's our Angry Rabbit, and I'm going to click and drag. What? There's fences that they put up. No, those are train tracks. No, that means that the column is not wide enough to show the full content. Now, I want to change all of the column widths at the same time. So I hover over B, click, drag to K, and now I pick any one and click and drag, and that will fit all of the columns to the same width. Now, here's another great fill handle Angry Rabbit trick. January, Control Enter, fill handle Angry Rabbit, click and drag. And you got to be kidding me. Excel knows months. I'm definitely not going to create my calendar over in Word. I'm doing it in Excel. Here's another great date trick. Let's put 1/1/2024. Control Enter. Click and drag. And when we let go, there's a smart tag. Hover, click the drop down, and you got to be kidding me. I can fill months. When I click that, I get the first of each month. Now, here we did months. What about days? Wednesday, Control Enter. Click and drag, and the fill handle and the angry rabbit, they know days too. And look at this. When it got to Sunday, it knew to start again at Monday. Now, we don't have to abbreviate the days. If I spell Wednesday right, it'll work. Control Enter. And I want to click and drag just to Friday. And then we'll start at Monday. Control Enter. Click and drag to Friday. Now, we have weekdays. Let's put in today's date, Control semicolon, Control Enter. And what I really want are weekdays only. When I click and drag, Monday is not the 26th. It should be the 28th. But here's our wonderful smart tag. Hover, click, and there we have fill weekdays. And just like that, now Monday is the 28th, Friday is the 25th. And sure enough, that is correct. Another thing we can do with the fill handle and angry rabbit is if I type a 2 and a 5, highlight, when I click and drag, Excel will recognize the pattern. Please always add 3. Click, drag, and there it is. Add 3, add 3, add 3. Now, there's lots of other amazing things with that little fill handle and the crosshair or angry rabbit. We'll get to see lots of uses throughout this class. Now, our next task is to enter scores. And we want to learn a highlighting and entering data trick. So we have the active cell at the top. And I want to enter 88, enter, 78, enter, 99, enter, 100, enter, 92, enter. And for Mo, 95. And now when I hit enter, it jumps up to the top of the column. Now for test 2, 87, 78, 92, 91. Enter, and up to the top of the next column. Now I'm going to hit pause and enter this data. When I unpause, you can hit pause and then enter the same numbers. And when I enter the last score and hit enter, it jumps back to the top of the first column. Now, hit pause, enter the numbers. All right, for our first formula, we're going to add the max points. That'll become the denominator that we'll use for each one of the students' total to calculate percentage grade. And of course, you remember from the beginning of the video, if you want the sum function, Alt equals. And unlike the beginning of the video where we had text values, this time it guesses right. Because if there are numbers right next to it, when you Alt equals, it will grab them. Enter, enter, enter. So it looks like 520 will be the denominator when we calculate percentage grade. Now, Alt equals, and before I Control Enter and copy this down, we got to talk about what happens to cell references when you copy a formula. Right now, it looks like it's C8 to J8, but it's really not. When we copy it down, because the formula moves from row 8 to row 9, this will become C9 to J9. This is called a relative cell reference. That means from the point of view of the formula, where is the formula always going to look? It's always going to look to the left, 8 cells. So Control Enter, grab that fill handle and the angry rabbit, and now we can click and drag. It can copy a formula too. Click in the last cell and hit the F2 key. We just want to verify that, sure enough, it is looking at the 8 cells to the left. Escape. If I click in the top cell, F2, row 8, enter, F2, sure enough, that is moving. Row 9, enter, 10, 11, 12, 13. Now with our total, we can calculate percentage grade. Now we're going to type an equal sign. Remember, all formulas start with an equal sign. And instead of clicking escape, I'm going to do it the fast way. Use my arrow keys. Equals left arrow divided by up, 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 left. So that's a relative cell reference right now. When I Control Enter, it'll work for this cell. But F2, what happens if we copy this? Well, you can sort of already guess, right? K5, well, if we copy a formula, that 5 is going to move to 6. Now, just to see that if we actually did this, it would not work, Control Enter. Copy it down one cell. That's a divide by 0 error because F2, that's 424 divided by an empty cell, which is 0. And that's not allowed. Now I want to Control Z, F2. The way that we convert a relative cell reference to a locked cell reference, called absolute cell reference, is you want to make sure that your cursor is touching somewhere next to or in the middle of the cell reference. If you do it over here, it won't work. But I'm going to have my cursor at the end. And when you hit the F4 key, it puts the dollar signs in to lock the column reference K and the row reference 5. That means no matter where we copy this formula, K5 is locked on K5. Control Enter. Click and drag. Go to the last cell and hit F2. We want to verify that, sure enough, that's a relative cell reference. That's absolute or locked. And it's working perfect. Now Enter. I want to go to the top cell and hit F2. And I want to look at how this formula is constructed and how we created it. First off, this is called a single input, single output formula, because on either side of the operator, there's a single item and a single item. When you have a formula like that, it can only deliver a single answer. And when we created this type of formula, we had to consider relative and absolute cell references. Then we had to Control Enter and manually copy it. Now we want to see not this F2 old school formula. This is the type of formula we've been creating for 40 years. But we want to see the new Microsoft 365 Excel dynamic spilled array formulas. Now I'm going to click Escape. Now I want to insert a column, create the percentage grade formula. But this time, we're going to use a dynamic spilled array formula. To insert a column, right-click the column header M and point to Insert. There's our new column. Now I want to copy using our fill handle and our angry rabbit. Click and drag. Now we can create our dynamic spilled array formula. Equal sign, and instead of a single relative cell reference, I'm going to highlight all of the cells that would have been relative cell references, type our operator, division, and then the denominator, 520. Now, there's the operator, and there's not just a single item on one of the sides. That makes this an array formula. What will happen is each item will be used in the numerator and 520 in the denominator. And check this out. I don't have to lock the cell reference. And when I Control Enter, I didn't have to manually copy that formula down the column. Those are two reasons why creating formulas with dynamic spilled array formulas are faster than F2, the old school formulas. Now let's learn some important things about dynamic spilled array formulas. Click in the top cell. I can see the formula up in the formula bar. But when I hit Enter, there's a ghost formula. Enter another ghost. And watch this. When I hit F2, there's nothing there. Well, there's a spilled value there and a ghost formula. And if you want to go grab that value right there in a formula, equals, I want that value from the spilled dynamic array, no problem. And the reason that there are ghosts and nothing in the cell is because guess what, F2, the formula only lives in the top cell. All those values below are just spilled. And you got to be careful. Don't put anything in the way of the spill. So if I type word, the formula is polite. It gives you a spill error, which says, hey, you put something in the way, so I can't fully spill. Delete. And now it can spill. Now, there's one other advantage to dynamic spilled array formulas. Let's edit the old school formula and then compare and contrast. F2, what I'd like to do is round this value. Now, remember, if we use number formatting, it only displays the number a certain way. If I want to change the number, then I have to use the round function. After the equal sign, but before that K8, ROU, notice in the dropdown, which offers up a bunch of functions, whatever function is in blue, if you hit Tab, it'll enter it into the formula. Not only that, but this is a description of what the function does. If I arrow down, there's another description. So you literally could teach yourself about the different round functions. The one we want is round. I see it highlighted in blue, so I hit Tab. Now, when you use a function, there's a screen tip, and it tries to help you complete the function. Now, it needs a number to round. That's our formula. Notice the number argument is bold. I want to click at the end very carefully with our I-beam cursor. I see that vertical flashing line, so I type a comma. Watch what happens right here, comma. Now it's polite. The next argument that you have to enter is in bold. Now, number of digits just means, hey, what position do you want to round to? For us, I'm going to count from the decimal to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to round to that position. Now, if you're rounding to the penny, it would be 1, 2. You'd put a 2 right there. To the dollar position, like for taxes, you put a 0. We want 1, 2, 3, 4, so I type a 4. And this, when I close parentheses and Ctrl Enter, will officially change the number. Now I can click and drag. Now notice, we edited the formula, and then we had to recopy it down. F2. Here's how we do it with dynamic spilled array formulas. ROU, Tab. We have our number. Click at the end, comma. I see number of digits in bold. I want to round using 4, close parentheses. And when I Control Enter, I do not have to recopy the formula down. So that means dynamic spilled array formulas, as opposed to the old school, we don't have to lock. We don't have to enter and manually copy. And we don't have to edit and manually copy again. With the dynamic spilled array formulas, you don't have to lock. You don't have to manually copy the formula. And editing is much faster and easier. Now, let's review the 3 different types of formulas we just created. Dynamic spilled array formula. On one of the sides of the operator, there are multiple items, so this formula spills multiple answers. F2, single input, single output formula. There's only single input, so the operator in the round function can only deliver a single answer. But what about this one, F2? Notice we have multiple items, an array of items, and the sum function can only deliver a single value. This is called an aggregate calculation. And all aggregate means is take multiple items and deliver one answer. Sum is taking multiple answers and giving you one sum. Average, taking multiple answers but always giving you a single answer. Similarly, a calculation like max, which means please find the biggest value. It goes through multiple items and gives you a single answer. So aggregate calculation, single input, single output, and dynamic spilled array formula. Now the next task is to calculate the decimal grade based on percent grade. But wait a second. We don't have a lookup table. We're going to create that off to the side. Actually, we're going to use the same 2 headers. I'm going to highlight and Control-C to copy. Come over here and Control-V. Let's point to the Smart tag, and I'll say, hey, keep column widths. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to create a column so that we can match these in a % grade column. Once we find a match, then in this column we'll have the decimal grades. A match means we'll jump over, get it, and the lookup function that we use will bring the grade back automatically. Now at the top, a percentage grade of 0 is 0, tab. The decimal grade, of course, is 0. Now I'm entering with the tab. When I hit Enter, it's polite. It goes back one column. The lowest possible percentage at Highline College to get the lowest possible decimal grade is 0.61. And I want you to notice something. I didn't type the leading 0. When I hit Tab, it's polite. It puts it in for me. The lowest grade is 0.7. I'm not putting in that leading 0 and Enter. 0.62, Tab, 0.8, Enter. Now, just like over here, we use the fill handle with our numbers right here. I've established a pattern. Always add 0.01, always add 0.1. And I can highlight both columns, point to the fill handle. I see my angry rabbit, and I'm reading the screen tip. When I get to 4.0, I let go. Now I want to control asterisk because I want to add borders. And there's our lookup table. Now here's how it works to look up a particular decimal, or later we can add percentage formatting. How we look it up, find a match, jump over to the corresponding position in the second column, and bring that decimal back. Now we're going to take 0.8154 and we race through and we try to find an exact match or the next smaller. Well, there's no exact match. That's the next smaller. So we take 2.7 and we bring it back. For 0.95, we race through. There's no exact match. We take the next smaller. So that grade is 4.0. And if someone has, OK, 0.5135 race through, well, we can't find an exact match. The next smaller is 0, so we return a 0. Now this column right here, it's important that it contains all the possible values to get a match for the percentage grade. And sure enough, it does. How does it have all possible values? Well, a formula like this can only deliver a number between 0 and 1. And 0 and 0.94 using exact match or next smaller, which is the type of lookup we'll do, will work perfectly. Now, let's try our amazing, well, wait a second. VLOOKUP is the function we've been using for 35 years, but we don't use it anymore. There were some problems with it, backspace, backspace. We use XLOOKUP. Not only does XLOOKUP solve those problems, but it can do oh so much more. Now we need a lookup value. Remember, we're taking this and we're trying to find a match in this column, then return something from this column. I type a comma to get to the next argument. Lookup array, that's where we're going to get a match. Now I'm going to click in the top cell, and I'm going to use a keyboard to jump down to the bottom. Control-Shift down arrow. It knew to stop because it saw an empty cell. Now I want to jump back to the active cell, Control backspace. Now that's a killer keyboard, because if you're 1,000 rows down and you just want to jump back to the active cell, Control backspace, comma, return array. Well, that's the column, and it has to be the same size as lookup array column. That's the column that has the item we want to go and get and bring back to the cell. Control-Shift down arrow, Control backspace, comma. If the function can't find a match, it yields an error. You can put something here to replace that error. But guess what? We already have every possible value, so we're never not going to get a match. We can simply skip it by typing a comma. Match mode. The first one is exact match. That's like looking up a product ID or a student ID. You want to match something exactly. We don't want that. I'm going to down arrow. We want exact match or next smaller. You can type -1 or hit tab. The final argument, comma, if you use exact match. Well, we almost always search from first to last. But what if you have multiple dates for a particular product and the price, and you want to search last to first so you can get the most up-to-date price? We don't need this, so I'm going to backspace, leave it out. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and there is the grade. Is that right? 90 point something? Sure enough, it can't find an exact match. Bam! So it's going to bring 3.6 back. Now, why did it not spell F2? Well, over here, we had an operator, division, and there were a bunch of items on one side. Well, we can spill when we have a function argument like lookup value, and instead of putting a single value in, which tells XLOOKUP to deliver a single value, I'm just going to highlight all the student percentages. And now when I Control Enter, bam, it spills down the column. Now, wait a second. F2? What is M8 pound or hashtag? Well, our formula knows that when pointing to a dynamic spilled array formula, that formula only lives in the top cell, M8. That hashtag or pound sign is a spilled range operator. That means please get everything that spills from M8. As a comparison, if I were to highlight these lookup values, well, we get the range L8 to L13. That's because the formula is in each one of the individual cells, not just the top cell. Click the lookup, highlight dynamic spilled array, and it knows what's going on here. M8 holds the formula, and that spilled range operator says, hey, get everything that spills from that top cell. Now, I'm not happy with this grades, and I want to add some extra credit. So rather than F2, adding and hard coding the number into each formula, Control Enter, copy it down, it works. But there's a huge problem. When you come back later and someone adds, they're like, why is it 481? That doesn't add up. Not only that, but when you come back later, you might not even remember. So Control Z F2. Anytime you have a formula input that can change, you have to put it in a cell, label it, and refer to it in the formula with the cell reference. So we're going to come up here, extra credit, 10, enter. Now, I'm lazy. I don't want to format this. So I'm going to come down here, right-click, Format Painter from the mini toolbar, click, and I have my formatting. Now we come down to the top cell, F2 plus 10. Now, we have to copy this formula, so we want the same cell reference in each cell, so we hit the F4 key. Control Enter, copy it down, and there are the new grades. You know, that's too much. I'm going to back it off. I'm going to type 5, and just like magic, everything updates. Now, we have one last thing, or one last formula. We want an average for each test and quiz. Now, average is an aggregate formula, just like sum. I'm going to type equals aver. I see it there. Later, we'll learn about the amazing average ifs. I'm going to hit Tab. These are going to be relative cell references. So when I copy it to the side, just as we did with sum, it'll know to get each column. And notice I'm not going to type a closed parentheses, because if I Control Enter, it's polite. It put it in. I can even see it up here. Click and drag all the way to the end. Now, we have some messy decimals here. And instead of coming up and clicking this button a bunch of times, I want to show you the Format Cells dialog box. Now, I'm going to highlight all the way to total. And this amazing dialog box has a keyboard, Control 1. Now, we'll learn about these tabs later. But the Number tab has thousands of number formatting options, much more than this group up here. All I want now is number, 0 decimal places. Click OK. Probably these two, since it's only going to be 2 clicks to get it down to 4. I'll highlight 1, 2. Now we have our finished gradebook. Now, I would like to print. Control P gives us print preview. Uh-oh. We have a bunch of stuff we don't want to print, and it looks like down here we have half the table on another sheet, and we don't want that. So I'm going to click Escape. And if we go up to Page Layout, right there, this opens the Page Setup dialog box. So we're going to click. Now, we definitely don't want Portrait because this is definitely wider than it is tall. So we're going to go Landscape. Margins, I'm going to give it a little extra room on the left and right. So I'll change it to 0.3 tab. That moves to the next text box, 0.3. And I would like, since if it's off to the side a little bit, it looks off kilter, I'm going to check horizontal. Header and footer. This is the preview for the header. This is the preview for the footer. We have some built-in ones, but the real power is either one of these buttons. We're going to have a footer, so I'm going to click Custom Footer. And the real power comes from these buttons. When we click these buttons, it actually puts code in for us so that it's dynamic. So this, and you can hover now. It says Insert Page Number. That's like for 1 of 5, 2 of 5. This would be total pages. That would be the 5. There's the current time. So when you print it out, it'll give that time. Current date. This is the complete file path, the workbook name, sheet name, even inserting a picture. You can also type whatever you want. Now, all we want is the sheet tab name. So I'm going to click this button, and it puts the code in. In the middle, I want page 1 of 5, page 2 of 5. So we click this. That code means whatever the current page is, it'll print that number out. Then I'm going to type a space of and a space and click total pages. So what we did here is we clicked to get code. We typed a little bit, and we clicked to get code. Over here, let's put date. Oh, no. That's time. I'm going to delete. Date, space, dash, space, and time. Now when we click OK, we get a preview down here. Now the last tab is going to be helpful. Print area. We want to click and then select from B1 all the way to N14. Everything else will be excluded. Let's click OK. I can already tell from this dotted line when I Control P, it looks like it's hanging out on the next page. When I click Next Page, it sure is. Now, we probably, since all of these columns could be made a little bit thinner, I'm going to highlight all of them and resize all of them at once. Click maybe right about there. We don't see that dashed line, so we know Control P. That is beautiful. Page setup. Now, the last thing we want to do is I want to be able to copy this. Now that I have this beautiful template, I want to rename this. To rename a sheet tab, you double click. I'm going to click at the end. And I'm in the winter quarter, so I'm going to type a W, and then open parentheses. For Highline, that's the first quarter of the year. Close parentheses, and Enter. Now I've registered a new name. By the way, if you want a new sheet, you click that. And if you want to color the sheet, right-click the sheet, and there's tab color. Now, the reason that I put a parentheses is because when I copy this, it'll automatically increment to 2. This is cool if you have a sheet for each week, week 1, 2, 3, or day 1, 2, 3. Now, to copy this, right-click, move, or copy, but I'm going to show you the keyboard. If you click and drag up, don't let go. You see that little black downward pointing triangle? That means I'm moving it. But now, if you hold Control, notice, look at that piece of paper. Plus, I'm holding Control. No, I'm not holding Control, so there's no plus. When I hold Control and see the plus, it means it's copying. Now, I'm going to let go of the mouse, not Control. And when I let go of the mouse, that is amazing. Now, actually, I do have to change this to spring, so I'm going to type S. And here's our template, and here's what we're going to do. We're not only going to delete all the scores, and you could type other names, but I'm going to delete all of these also. Temporarily, it gives us divide by 0. and I want to delete the extra credit. I want to enter the first test score, so 100, enter. And then 88, 87, 92, 98, 99, 52, and enter. And by entering just the max points in this particular assignment, as you go along, this will give you the current information, including the current grade, based on whatever assignments have been completed. Now, we can fix this right here. F2, after the equal sign before the A, type if. There's a bunch of great if functions. I'll show you all of them later, but the one we want is if error. Down arrow, tab. There's the value. Come to the end. We're going to type a comma to read the next argument, comma. Value if error, well, you get to put what you want. I'm putting a 0. Close parentheses. Control Enter. And copy it all the way to the side. And sure enough, what? We get a bunch of 1s. But I copied the formula. Here it's looking good, but guess what? When you copy a formula, it copies the formula and the formatting. So our smart tag comes to the rescue again. Hover, click, and you got to be kidding. Fill without formatting. This means it will copy just the formulas. And just like that, we copied the formula and retained our formatting. Now, I have one last cool thing to show you. I want to come back to Gradebook Winter 1, and I want to copy this sheet. So I'm going to hold Control, click, drag up. I see the plus. I'm going to drop it right after Gradebook Spring 2, letting go of the mouse, but not Control. Now I can let go of Control. And I'm going to rename this, double click. And I'm going to call it BR for by row and BC for by column. We have dynamic spilled array formulas, and that replaces the single input, single output. We're allowed to use functions and spill. But what about aggregate formulas? Just as an example, if I delete all this, and right here, Alt equals, I'm just going to see if I can spill, but that's never going to spill because guess what? That's an aggregate formula. No matter how many numbers you put in, it's always only going to deliver a single answer. Control Z, Z. Now, what I'm about to show you is currently in beta, but I'm filming this on October 30th, 2024. And within a few months, what I'm about to show you, how to spill aggregate calculations, should be out of beta and into all of Microsoft 365. All right, I want to delete all these. There's a formula in each cell, so I highlight and use the delete key. Same here, delete. And now let's see what Microsoft did to spill aggregate calculations. Equals by row. The array argument, we just enter an array where we want to make a calculation for each row, comma to get to the function argument, and there's a drop down. For this one, we want sum, so I'm going to tab, close parentheses, and that's it. Control Enter, and aggregate totals spill down the column. F2, and if I want my extra credit here, I select 5, and that will be added to each one of these. Control Enter. Down here, well, we have the same array, but we want to do something for each column. Equals by column. There's the array, same array, comma. The function, down arrow, tab. Now we're going to calculate an average for each column. Now I wanted to extend it all the way to the end, so F2. And I want to point to, it's not a fill handle, but it's a little square in the corner. And when I see my diagonal pointing arrow, there it is, I click and drag to change the number of columns. Control Enter, and now our average spills across all the columns. All right, by, call, and by row. Amazing functions. They may not be in Microsoft 365 right now, but soon. Wow, that was an epic video. We learned about up and coming BYROW and BYCOL to spill aggregate totals. We learned how to copy sheets. Control P, we learned all about page setup. We learned about 3 different types of formula: aggregate, single input, single output, and dynamic spelled array formulas. We learned about the XLOOKUP function, how to build a lookup table for that XLOOKUP function. We learned about style formatting, a lot about number formatting. And we learned about the amazing crosshair or angry rabbit to do all sorts of amazing things. All right, that was a lot of fun with Excel Basics number 1. We'll see you next video for Excel Basics number 2.